All right. Mr. Robert Champion, thank you for joining us on Heroic Hospitality. This is my business partner, everyone, Robert.
Hey, Mario.
So I thought it'd be fun to have Robert on, and everybody gets to know Robert a little bit, gets to know our story a little bit, and our journey together, and what it was like to open Beacon. So maybe a little bit of like a year in review. A little backstory on you, I think, is like super important because we do have some really fun information and double top secret information we're going to share later. So make sure to hang out with us through the end. If you like Beacon, you're going to love the announcement later. So, Robert, you and I met, 3 years ago?
Possibly 4.
Possibly 4, yeah. Before we get into kind of our journey, maybe just give us a highlight of what you've been up to the last decade or so.
Yeah, the last decade or so, I have been kind of a community gatherer, and that's kind of how I fit into the Beacon picture. Lacking the hospitality background that you have, my whole background is around events and experiences and community and getting people together for the sake of making long-lasting bonds. So before 10 years ago, I was doing it, honestly, starting in high school, co-founded a music festival. In college, I started a car club. When I graduated, I created my own car enthusiast social network, and that was in 2005.
Okay.
And then about 13 years ago, I started hosting car enthusiast events around the country, specifically for Subaru. My whole life, I was a giant enthusiast. Wound up having a lot of friends, noticed there's a thing, started going to gatherings. Before you know it, I'm hosting thousands of people across the country over the course of the last 13 years. And it's been really beautiful to see, just what community can provide to people's lives outside of the original reason that they even gathered, right? So it goes so much beyond that shared passion or shared experience in the end, which is why I love to do it.
Awesome. You have a great story. Obviously, I know it really well. We've had a lot of late nights talking about both of our experiences up to opening Beacon. One thing that I know, so a lot of our listeners are either entrepreneurs or nightlife enthusiasts, hospitality professionals or workers. When you own one of the biggest Subaru enthusiast companies in the country. Is that correct?
Yeah, well, I own all of the largest Subaru enthusiast gatherings.
That's right.
So there's 7 of them. So I'm kind of like the guy.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
how did you acquire that business?
It was a lot of luck, but also just my dedication towards the purpose. I was hanging out with one of the guys who was doing what was at the time the largest Subaru enthusiast gathering in the country. It was like 1,500 people in Massachusetts, and I was trying to support his vision and kind of at his side, like advising, and eventually he was just like, "You want to just buy this thing?" And I did for very cheap. So in 2010, I hosted my first version of that event. And then, within a decade, it was 6, now 7 events, 28,000 people across the country.
Yeah.
And working with hundreds of companies who want to have access to these people.
Companies like in an example of that is like maybe some shocks or tires or rims.
Yeah,
is that
all
of the things that encompass anything that's on an automobile, really?
Yeah, I mean, whether it's a performance part or actual car dealer or someone who just sells shirts to the community or just literally anything.
Yeah.
And especially Subaru, they're very involved. So, it's a big day of celebration. It's also a community gathering, and the community spirit is I'm very excited to see how alive the community spirit still is today, and the kind of things that I get to hear from people like, I met so-and-so 2 years ago at this thing in the car show portion, and we've been hanging out like every week since.
Oh, that's amazing.
So there was an old adage over a decade ago, which was, come for the car, stay for the people.
You still use that?
We do casually.
Yeah.
Yeah, like throughout. It's not like on our homepage or anything like that. But it's the purpose is still there, and I get to see it left and right, and that's what fuels me in that business, and that's largely why I felt it was important to do something like Beacon.
Yeah. Now you were supporting someone, that the person that you bought the company from, you were supporting him because you just loved the spirit of what he was doing, and you loved the cars, you loved Subaru, you loved Subarus, you loved all of that at the beginning. When you think about that experience, do you have someone that either works for you or supports you in Subaru now, and like what that relationship looks like and how that's enabled you to either grow the business or really dial in like specific parts of it? Because I do feel like if we don't have like a great number two, or how to get a number two, or what that looks like for some people, can you maybe give us some insight on that?
Yeah, definitely. Our favorite Kan Duong, he's been my right-hand man since the very beginning. I heard him 2 days ago at an event share with a bunch of volunteers how in 2011 he flew himself across the country to volunteer at an event. That's how dedicated he was.
Wow.
Fast forward a few years, he's the GM. He's one of my best friends. He is kind of the guy that keeps that thing rolling forward logistically. I mean, they just did 2 events in 2 different states, over 10,000 people over the course of 9 days. And he is he's the engine behind that for sure.
Holy moly, that's a lot. I mean, can you repeat that? That was amazing.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
Yeah, we did 2 events in 2 different states.
Yep.
Hosting over 10,000 people in 9 days. So never had 2 several thousand person gatherings back to back like that, but it was possible. It went off pretty smoothly and made a lot of people happy. And
it's amazing.
It's a lot of work.
So imagine throwing a dinner party for 10 people at your house, and the amount of anxiety and stress for some people that causes, and then times that by however many that is. Thousands and thousands and thousands of people at a location that you don't know, in a state that you're not familiar with people that you think they're going to come, but like really, it's all just what you've done and how you've done it has been the secret sauce. So hats off to you for not only creating something awesome, but continuing to enhance what you create. And I think that it's a great segue into kind of our journey. We met in a very unusual, not unusual way for us, but like I think that it would be
maybe
unusual.
That most people would be unusual.
It would be pretty unusual. We have 2 best friends, one named Johnny, which is Paul's, and which is Robert's, and then Paul's, which is mine. And we've had Paul on the show before. Johnny would be a great guy to have on this show. Amazing. Such an ambassador to the art community. And we were introduced within a 48-hour period of time by 2 different people in 2 different ways, because you wanted to open, at that point, it was a spa. It was a spa concept, I think. Social spa, yeah. And then 48 hours later, after we were introduced by these 2 special people in our lives, we met. I'll let you take the story from there.
Yeah, it's actually fantastic because I knew that there would need to be a hospitality component to a social spa, which is still a concept that I dream of every day. I don't know if you knew this, but Colorado is dry.
Yes.
And
speaking of which, yeah.
And and you were kind of the known guy. That's why Johnny tried to introduce us. Well, he did actually connected us over Facebook Messenger, and then sure enough, a couple days later, we end up sitting next to each other at one of Paul's parties and meet at 4 a.m. by total chance.
Wait, you're Robert? Wait.
Yeah, exactly. And it was such a great introduction because I remember telling you about it, and he pulled out I can't remember what's called, the 7 questions, which are all why.
Oh, okay.
And I started telling you about the concept, and you're just like, why do you want to do it? Why do you want to do it? Why do you want to do it? And before I knew it, I'm like talking about, having lost my family when I was young and how community is like so important to me. And it kind of really unearthed the why. You know, what's the driver, the subconscious driver that's wired in me to want to create stuff like this. And
Yeah.
yeah.
That's awesome. Well, I obviously appreciate the story. We wouldn't be here today in this location, in this amazing place called Beacon, without each other and without you sparking that. So
Thank you.
my life is better because of it. So thank you very much. You know, and during that period of time, I think I poked some holes in that, and we ended up having coffee a couple times, and you had started to recall some other powerful experiences in environments like Burning Man and like your travels abroad. And then, you know, we started talking about that and that potential concept for you. And at the time, I was just, you know, just helping you. There was no talk of partnership. There was no talk of let's do this together. There was just a stranger helping another stranger out. And I think that's just really important that people understand that is like, you know, I was giving something without an ask or something in return. Just like before you acquired the Subaru company, you were giving something without the need or expectation for something in return, just because you were passionate about it. And I think that it's really important that it's not always a monetary exchange that really bears fruit. And it's really important that people understand that, because it is very easy to say yes to $1. And it's harder to say yes to spending time with someone that you don't know.
Yeah.
And with you in that experience at Subi, and with me with you. And so please.
You know, and I will say that, you know, to speak to what you just said about supporting or finding opportunities to help, that's definitely one of your superpowers. I've witnessed, obviously, how you can creatively problem solve on behalf of someone without any desire or anything in exchange. And it's definitely something that I learned from you a lot and aspire to be like. It's always easier. Like, I wish people would just ask me for stuff, because then I could just be like, oh yes, here's my chance. And you know, and so there's an invitation to ask me for things, but but you are good at just spotting it, or just like being a quick yes and not being too preoccupied with what other things are happening in your life, which is always something, but you still seem to have time. So
that's a huge compliment.
Yeah,
thank you very much.
That
means a lot to me, Robert. So, you know, with that being said, once we peeled back the layers of the social spa, which is still somewhere back here for both of us, what were some of the other concepts that we kind of talked about and mutually poked holes in and mutually celebrated, even though I hadn't been to some of these places that you had? And
definitely. You know,
and this, by the way, is the inspiration for how Beacon was created.
Yeah, it was the conversation starter for sure. And when I had asked you to meet up with me again, it was because I had seen some things and had a whole new direction. And it started actually at Burning Man 2019. I went to what quickly became my favorite theme camp, which is the Golden Guy theme camp, GUY.
Yeah.
It is inspired by the Golden Guy neighborhood of Shinjuku in Tokyo. And so I stumbled upon this camp, which is all of these intimate, artful spaces where individuals are creating their own unique thing. And it's a winding little Japanese alleyway, and playing to the Japanese theme a bunch, like just super weird stuff to noodles to alcohol.
He's talking about bar concepts.
Yeah.
Short.
Throughout the alleyway, there's just so many different little things happening, all within basically like quarter-size shipping containers.
Yeah.
So they're really small and very intimate, and you wind up talking to everyone around you. And by chance, Subaru flew me to Japan for a commercial filming thing 3 weeks after Burning Man. And I had 3 days off, and I spent most of that time in the Golden Guy neighborhood in Japan and was blown away. There's like 200 bars in one city block. Mm-hmm. So if there's 14 people in a bar, it is packed, like uncomfortably packed.
Yeah.
And what I found though is that as I hop from place to place, and they were all also wildly themed. Like some were normal, but some were just like as wild as this, truthfully. And wherever I went, I recognized that I was talking to the people around me. It's really awkward to not acknowledge a person if you have to be that close to them,
Yeah.
right? And then it got me thinking, when I'm in Denver, everyone builds to go big. Like there's so many places that have just vast open areas. It's so easy to just not acknowledge or not be a part of that other person's experience at the bar.
A good example would be like a brewery.
Yeah, brewery. A lot of big clubs are like that. Because they want volume and they want the business, but there isn't really a focus on intimacy with other patrons, conversation between patrons. And I realized, like, you know what, I don't go out in Denver that much because we don't have that. And that's when I came back to you, thinking that it was time to start a bar.
Yeah, it's amazing. Harnessing kind of that idea and spirit, and then pulling back a handful of layers and like what works financially. And we figured out pretty quick that we couldn't have a bunch of these bars in one short and in one small condensed area. So, but we did want to take that spirit of these intimate places, right? And I feel like we did a good job with Beacon. I think that looking back, it's always kind of like, oh, maybe this or maybe that, which is super awesome and powerful and very common. Mm-hmm. I think that our commitment to the concept is really important for people to understand, because we could have cut corners, and there was pieces of us that did do that. But the main pieces of Beacon, we invested in. And when I say invested in, we actually raised more money to create an artist-inspired dance bar. And that's what we were calling it.
Yeah.
It didn't come easy to find that, like, to distill what we were going after for a couple months, right? It didn't just come like out of the blue. It was a lot of these conversations.
Yeah. Well, it started with a conversation, me saying, hey, Mario, how do you have 8 bars in one place and staff all of the bars and own all of the bars, instead of Tokyo, where they're all individual owners, and clearly they're having to be there all the time because they're so small. And obviously that's when you very quickly taught me that that's just not a thing, and I quickly agreed.
It's amazing.
So we're like, how do we use the small space concept, but also how do we throw great parties, because the community we're involved with can't even seem to go camping without having stellar DJs and lighting, and it just happens organically. So obviously we're going to need a dance floor, and
we sure
but
did.
the right sized one, not too big, not too small, adjacent to these small rooms. And then sure enough, anyone who's been to Beacon is going to know exactly how that played out.
Yeah,
that's what we have.
The other crazy thing, Robert, was one thing that we identified with the Golden Guy, in the Golden Guy spirit, was taking customers, guests on a journey, which we did do that, which we kind of moved the bathrooms like 9 feet one direction, but we still have the bathrooms anchored in the center of the space that we lease in RiNo in Denver, Colorado. And it takes people on a journey. Yeah. And I believe that was a great call on our part.
Yeah.
Yeah, for this space particularly.
Totally.
Yeah.
It takes a lot of guts because most people actually probably assume the bathrooms are here and that's why they stay there. It's like, no.
We actually spent money on keeping them there.
Yeah, we put them there, put the bathrooms in the middle of the space on purpose, which is, that's a very daring move. And I don't expect anyone who's even trying to do something like this to still have the guts to do that, because you're cutting your space up so much. But the journey really works. I mean, the way that you get to pass through the bar, which is low, and our willow weave bar that's kind of a tunnel in itself.
Yes.
And through that, the architecture kind of sends you to the dance floor, in which case you start to have some options. You can go out, you can go to the art rooms. That was not on accident by any means.
Yeah, to see the trees, to see the clouds through the trees as you're walking in is my favorite view of Beacon. What are some of the other things that I think through your lens, like set us apart from other places that aspire to gather people, but also connect them? Because it's one thing to throw out the buzzwords like community and gather, but we really do try to focus on intimacy in Beacon, intimacy with one another, and your and the guest experience with Beacon. I mean, those are two very different and very intimate experiences, right? The customer with each other and the customer with Beacon. Is there something or one or two things that you're very proud of or want to let tell the listeners and just kind of allow them in your, through between your ears for a second? And
Yeah, big time. There's so much to say there, but the biggest piece is clearly our staff.
Mm-hmm.
Our staff is the glue from how every single person treats the guests and how they welcome them, how they welcome people in such a unique way, to how they get them a drink while being a character in themselves. And all the soft touch to how they even communicate to people who might be waiting in line, to either entertain them or inform them, get them stoked.
Keep them safe.
Yeah, keep them safe.
Yeah.
So the staff is everything. And you know that because you're the one that groomed them.
Thank you.
To really fit the mold of what we're trying to create here, which is something that is so unique and so special and so connective, and a place where it's intentionally fully lit, because we don't want a dark corner for sketch balls.
Mm-hmm.
It's like that's just not an option. If you can't be seen head to toe in a place, then maybe you should try somewhere else, or try working on yourself and come back.
Yeah.
We feel really strongly about people being able to hear each other wherever they are. And I think we accomplished that. People can feel music, but still have conversation. Just without conversation, then how are they going to be connecting, right? So, and we promote some underlying principles, kind of hide them in the bathrooms for people to absorb, which is, so the short version is to, be authentic, to use alcohol as a social lubricant, but not as a way to check out.
Check in, not, those are your words. Check in, not check out.
Check in, not check out, exactly. And to use the word to use the word consent without waving a stick, but it really is like it's really such a gift to someone to be asked for permission for anything. Can I sit next to you? Can I put my hand on your shoulder? And it's we do it all the time.
Can I
when
give
we're
you
just
a hug?
being a good human. Yeah, exactly. It's so just a little reminder there. For people to be mindful on how they engage with each other, and what that really does is, it's not really like here's a code of conduct. It's actually an invitation to operate in a place that's kind of up-leveled for everyone, and through that you just see how it kind of plays out. People are just way more considerate towards each other, and honestly, most importantly, our staff, following those principles, gives those patrons permission to also then go do that. And we see it. We see people play
all the time.
We see people making out in corners. We see people goofing off. We see people dancing like mad, even when there's a half-empty dance floor still. There's still people who just do not care and are getting down, and creating that safe space for people to be themselves has been probably one of the best gifts of this whole thing.
I agree. That is, for me, getting to know and love and learn about the staff for me is definitely really like number one. I think a close two is having very intimate relationships with some of the artists that we employ and that we've employed throughout the course of the year, right? And I think one of the things that we do really well as a business is if we make a decision and that decision doesn't work, whether it's a bullshit bodega where everybody's just stealing things. When we first opened Beacon, we had, which I love, and I still want this at some point in my life, even if it's in my home, a bullshit bodega where you can get everything from piñatas to condoms to, everything. It was wild.
It was random jewelry to sex puzzles to snacks to, it was just such a weird array of stuff that was just unfortunately way too easy for people to pocket
Yeah.
in a place that is high volume and alcoholic.
Yeah, it was. We thought greatly about it, but yeah, as soon as we opened, it was pretty clear. It wasn't. It was a couple months, about 3 months before it was clear that this wasn't going to work, and so we changed. And I think that whoever is listening to this, just because you have, and specifically restaurant folks, like you have this dream, you have this intention of opening a specific type of restaurant or a specific type of bar with your vision, and that's your vision, and you're doing this thing and you're raising the money for it. Well, that isn't always how it plays out. If you get 65 or 70% of that, you're stoked. We just had Tommy on the show, and the same thing was with him. It's like he had to change to receive more business to stay open with his dream. And so it's just really important that if something isn't working the way that you had this intention of it working, have an open mind and change it. That's a good example right there. We wanted to have an indoor place dance bar. Like, how awesome would it have been if we would have been able to keep that? Like, where
Of the garage door,
right? And like, that would have been an amazing experience to have the garage door open. The DJ's right here. The garage door's there. There's a big outside, canopy on. Like, in our minds, it was the most beautiful idea. And we had to put cinder block up because we wanted and needed to respect the neighbors, which we did and do. And so I think that's just another, like, one of those pieces that you can get from our experience and learn from someone that has learned before, is like, if you start with something and it needs to change a little bit, be open enough and willing enough to accept that change. And so the bodega is a great example. Now it's our biggest selfie spot. I think it's our biggest selfie spot
by a lot,
right?
Yeah.
And if you've seen imagery of people in a ballroom, that's what we're talking about.
LED balls.
LED
hanging.
balls.
Yeah.
Oh man. So I think just that learning experience is a close number 2, and figuring out ways to jockey that.
Yeah, we're always learning, and the only way to learn is to start trying stuff. At the end of the day, like, you got to start taking steps forward. Otherwise you're never going to find out. And sometimes ideas are tedious, like babysitting items on a shelf, and sometimes they're actually quite easeful. The point is, you got to try stuff.
Yeah. I think another thing that is valuable for the listeners is, like, so I'll bring up Tommy again. Tommy owns Uncle Hop Alley. You're buddies with him. He chose to do his concept without investors. He figured out a way to muster the energy, friends, family, whatever it was. He didn't have outside investors, and he doesn't have a partner. So he is basically not a one-man show, but because he also has a lot of, he embraces his employees a lot and management a lot as well. But, like, having a partnership is different than doing it on your own. It's not always easy. And we have a fantastic relationship. I'm proud of our relationship, but it's just like any other relationship. We have to work at it, and we have to be honest with each other, and we have to look internal, and I'll speak for myself, internal to how I'm showing up for you, and pay close attention to your type of character. You're a different character than I am. Things resonate differently with you than me. And so just because it's hard doesn't mean you should give up. And a great example of that is going to be our next step together forward. And so in this day and age, I'll tell you, I see so many people just give up with relationships, with their Google searches, with, finding someone online or finding someone face to face. There is that analog and digital and the beauty between them. Can you speak to that at all? Or
For a relationship?
Well, partnerships or relationships in general,
yeah.
because you're very good at both of those things. So.
Yeah. So I can speak to that because I am very different from you.
Mm-hmm.
And, actually, I think it was before I showed you the Golden Guy theme camp at Burning Man last year, we had a little celebration in that and how different we are, which is a moment I'll probably remember forever.
Me too. Special.
And I started making websites 20 something years ago. When I hit save, I expect to have results. And I'm just so, and I can go way too quick sometimes because I'm so overly focused on the goal. And if I was by myself, could I move faster on things? Absolutely. But I probably wouldn't have learned 80% of the things that I've learned working with you, right? I would have just been plowing through things and maybe learning a little bit too much the hard way in the end. So that is probably the beauty in partnership, is that while everything is a negotiation and a conversation, it does slow things down so that there's an opportunity to really, really vet an idea or really make a decision, or, it's so just sometimes when I'm a little bit too in a hurry, I just remind myself that's how the process is. I encourage people to be in partnerships, and working with others is to me, like, so important, like if not one of the most important things. Some people like Tommy, I'm sure he employs just managers that,
He really does. He does a great job. Yeah.
Like his family is, in that regard, is probably everything. And that's a different structure. But at the end of the day, it's who you surround yourself by.
It's great advice, and really just not giving up and really paying attention and checking in with yourself and how you're showing up for somebody else will always be a service to the relationship. And I think you and I innately came into this partnership with a good understanding of that, and I think a better understanding now, because it isn't easy, and we do and are different people. But if there was a message here, it's just don't give up. I mean, if you have two people and they have a similar spirit and a similar love for similar things, then figure out what is the glue to the relationship and build off it. And Beacon is an amazing example of our glue, and I just can't thank you enough for being and being a part of my journey with you, and vice versa. You've just been such a huge influence on me in a positive way, and we wouldn't be here, and people wouldn't be dancing in this place without you. So, so thank you for that, Robert.
Of course, thank you.